In the heart of Renaissance Italy, a storm was brewing within the sacred walls of the Catholic Church. A storm not of faith, but of greed, lust, and power. It was a time when the papacy, the highest spiritual authority in Christendom, became entangled with the darkest corners of human ambition. At the center of it all stood Rodrigo Borgia, the man who would become Pope Alexander VI. To many, he was a symbol of corruption, nepotism, and unrestrained vice. To others, he was a political genius navigating a treacherous world. But for history, he would be remembered as the sinful pope whose scandalous reign exposed the rotten underbelly of the Church. Rodrigo Borgia was born on January 1, 1431, in Zativa, near Valencia in Spain, to a powerful and ambitious family. His uncle, Alfonso de Borgia, became Pope Calixtus III in 1455, opening doors of opportunity for young Rodrigo. At just 25, Rodrigo was made a cardinal and vice-chancellor of the Church, a powerful position that allowed him to amass great wealth. He was charming, educated, and politically astute. But his charisma was paired with a reputation for immorality. Even in his early years, he fathered several children, a scandal in itself for a man of the cloth. Yet, in the corrupt climate of Renaissance Rome, such sins were easily overlooked if one had the right connections and enough gold. By the late 15th century, Rome was a city of decadence. The Church, rather than serving as a moral guide, had become a playground for aristocrats and schemers. Popes bought their way into office. Cardinals sold indulgences to fund their opulent lifestyles. Corruption was endemic. In this environment, Rodrigo thrived. He was a skilled administrator and knew how to win allies. But above all, he knew how to play the political game. When Pope Innocent VIII died in 1492, Rodrigo saw his chance. The papal conclave that followed was rife with bribery and backroom deals. Rodrigo offered vast sums of money and land to influential cardinals, securing their votes. His rival, Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere, who would later become Pope Julius II, accused him of simony, the selling of church offices. But the accusations fell flat. Rodrigo emerged victorious and was crowned Pope Alexander VI on August 11, 1492. The Borgia era had begun. As Pope, Alexander VI wasted no time consolidating his power. His first priority was his family. He legitimized his children, a shocking move for a pope, and openly promoted them to high positions. His favorite children, Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia, became the tools of his ambition. Cesare, ruthless and cunning, was appointed cardinal at just 18, despite having no clerical training. Lucrezia, beautiful and politically useful, was married off to powerful families to secure alliances. The Pope's brazen nepotism shocked many, but none dared challenge him. Rome under Alexander VI became a theater of spectacle and sin. Lavish banquets, orgies, and masquerades were held within the Vatican itself. One infamous event, known as the Banquet of Chestnuts, allegedly featured dozens of prostitutes and was attended by Cesare and other members of the papal court. Whether exaggerated or not, such tales fueled the legend of the depraved Borgia court. The Vatican was no longer a symbol of holiness. It was a palace of vice, but Alexander VI was more than a libertine. He was a master politician. Italy at the time was a fragmented land of city-states, each vying for power. Florence, Milan, Venice, Naples, and the Papal States were constantly at war or alliance. Foreign powers like France and Spain sought influence over Italian affairs. Alexander navigated this landscape with Machiavellian precision. He switched allegiances as it suited him, betraying former allies and courting new ones. In 1494, Charles VIII of France invaded Italy, aiming to claim Naples. The invasion shocked the Italian states, but Alexander, ever opportunistic, played both sides. At first, he resisted the French, but when they reached the gates of Rome, he quickly made peace. He even recognized Charles as King of Naples in exchange for papal concessions. Once the French left, Alexander turned against them, aligning with their enemies. This duplicity became a hallmark of his reign. Meanwhile, Cesare Borgia grew in power. Dissatisfied with the Church, he resigned as cardinal, another scandal, and was made Duke of Valentinois by the French king. Cesare became a military commander, leading campaigns to conquer cities in central Italy and expand the Borgia domain. His ruthlessness was legendary. He used assassinations, poisonings, and treachery to crush rivals. Some historians believe he may have even murdered his own brother Giovanni, whose body was found floating in the Tiber River in 1497. The motive: jealousy and political rivalry. Lucrezia Borgia, too, was caught in the web of power. Often portrayed as a femme fatale, modern historians suggest she was more victim than villain. Used as a pawn in her father's political games, she was married multiple times, often against her will. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza was annulled when the Sforza family fell out of favor. Her second husband, Alfonso of Aragon, was murdered under suspicious circumstances, many believe on orders from Cesare. Lucrezia was later married to Alfonso d'Este Ferrara, where she finally found some stability. As the Borgias tightened their grip on power, enemies multiplied. The reformer Girolamo Savonarola, in Florence, denounced the corruption of the church and called Alexander the Antichrist. Though Savonarola's radical theocracy eventually collapsed, his fiery sermons exposed the rot at the heart of the papacy. Even inside the Vatican, dissent grew. Cardinals resented Alexander's nepotism. Foreign ambassadors reported his debauchery. Yet he remained unshaken. In 1500, during the Jubilee year, Alexander used the occasion to fill Vatican coffers. He sold indulgences and church offices, exploiting the faithful who came to Rome for blessings. With the money, he funded Caesar's military campaigns and enriched the Borgia clan. By now, the name Borgia had become synonymous with corruption and sin across Europe, but every reign has its end. In 1503, Alexander and Cesare fell ill after a banquet. Some believe they were poisoned, others suggest malaria. Alexander died on August 18, 1503. His death marked the beginning of the Borgia decline. Cesare, weakened and without his father's support, was captured and later killed in battle in 1507. Lucrezia lived until 1519. Dying in Ferrara as a duchess, far from the scandals of Rome, Alexander's death was met with mixed reactions. Some celebrated the end of a corrupt era. Others feared the chaos that might follow. His body, it is said, swelled and decomposed rapidly, seen by some as divine punishment. Yet the truth of his legacy is more complex. He was a product of his time, an era when power was the ultimate currency, and the church was both spiritual sanctuary and political machine. The Borgia papacy left a deep scar on the Catholic Church. The scandals of Alexander VI and his family became fodder for Protestant reformers. Martin Luther, decades later, would cite Borgia corruption as proof of Rome's moral decay. The Reformation, in part, was fueled by the sins of the Borgias. The Council of Trent, held in the mid-16th century to address church reform, was haunted by the shadow of Alexander VI. Even centuries later, the Borgia name evokes images of poison rings, incest, and political murder. Whether entirely true or embellished by enemies, their story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of absolute power. Alexander VI may have been a brilliant tactician, but his lust for power undermined the very institution he was meant to protect. Modern historians have tried to reassess his legacy. Some argue that he was no worse than many other Renaissance popes, and that his administrative reforms and political savvy were impressive. Others see in him the embodiment of the Church's darkest hour. What is certain is that his reign forced a reckoning. The Church could no longer ignore the corruption within. And though it took time, the seeds of reform were planted in the wake of his sins. The Borgias have since become legend, immortalized in novels, films, and television. Their story continues to fascinate because it reveals the collision of sacred duty and human weakness. Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, was not just a sinner in the robes of a saint. He was a mirror reflecting the rot within one of the world's most powerful institutions. His life, full of intrigue, betrayal, and scandal, remains one of the most dramatic chapters in the history of the papacy. In the end, the tale of the sinful pope is not merely about a man who fell to temptation. It is about a system that allowed, even encouraged, corruption in the name of power. The Vatican, draped in gold and incense, became a stage for ambition rather than faith. And at the center of that stage stood Alexander VI, a pope who ruled not through holiness, but through cunning and control. The Borgia legacy may be infamous, but it serves as a powerful reminder that when institutions lose sight of their purpose, when the guardians of faith become slaves to vice, the consequences can echo through history. Rodrigo Borgia was a sinner, a schemer, and a survivor. But above all, he was a man who showed the world what happens when lust, power, and faith collide.